Good day. And today we're ending Duke Simber with a bang by taking a look at the little-known alien Rampage, aka Duke Nukem Forever. But before we take a look at the game, let's first take a look at its history. Duke Nukem first appeared in 1991, and he appeared in a side-scrolling action game, and that particular game was notable for the fact that it played both fast and fluidly at a time when such a thing was difficult to implement on a PC. Duke Nukem 2 was released in 1993, and was essentially more of Duke Nukem 1, just with a more complex story, and better graphics and music, and more fast and fluid gameplay. Just what a good sequel should be. Then, Duke Nukem 3D was released in 1996, and was the third game in the Duke Nukem series, and also was one of the landmark FPS titles of the time, and a sequel was certain, except it took many years for Duke Nukem Forever to be made. Now, keeping all that in mind, I was recently linked to a page on the Duke Nukem Wiki by a fan, and that particular page talked about a side-scrolling Duke Nukem Forever, which intrigued me to say the least. It was to have been a side-scroller like the earlier games and retain the same interactivity that Duke Nukem 3D introduced. But the game would eventually be cancelled. But that was not the end for that particular game. Oh no, it would not simply be scrapped. Rather, it would be renamed Ravager, and work would continue on it. And then eventually, that would be sold to Inner Circle Creations, and they would then release that particular game as Alien Rampage. So, essentially what we have here is a Duke Nukem Forever. Just with the sprites and graphics, and overall storyline changed. But really, despite all that, when you start playing the game, you can definitely see that this was supposed to be a Duke Nukem game. And so now, let's fire up old DOSBox and take a look at it. Alien Rampage is a side-scrolling action-adventure game in the grand tradition of many of its type. The gameplay is fast and fluid, and yet it is 100% balls-to-the-wall hard. Holy shit, ladies and gentlemen, if you thought games like Duke Nukem Manhattan Project or Donkey Kong Country were difficult, you have another thing coming when it comes to this game. Everything is out to kill you, and for the first parts of the game, you only have what 40k fans would call a flashlight, even though the game calls it a fucking bolter. Yeah, a bolter this ain't. Seeing as how it doesn't shoot mass reactive shells and instead shoots flashlights. I mean laser bolts. Really, this is pretty much the same weapon that the Imperial Guardsmen get, and those things are only good if they're fired en masse. The enemies all take a shitload of damage, and there are always dozens of the fucking things about. You don't have hardly any health at first, and must find special items to raise your max health. The last gun is pretty much your only weapon for a while, as it has unlimited ammo, and you don't start to get the good ammo until later on. The game does have an interesting system for dying, though. When you get killed, you lose credits, which is the game's money system. Now, on a given level, you will be collecting money all the time. And this money can not only go towards dying, but also towards shops that sell you ammo. And so when you die, you lose a little bit of money. So not only will you be dying all the fucking time, but the game penalizes you for it as well. Still, the game is more tough but fair, as it is very generous in giving you money, so it will be somewhat hard to actually run out. As a side-scroller, you're going to be doing quite a bit of platforming. And this is where, well, the developers show just how horribly sadistic they are. By placing enemies at a drop-down point on a ledge, meaning if you don't actually check before you jump off of a ledge, you're going to be landing into a fuck-ton of enemies. Entire battalions of enemies that will proceed to rip you to pieces. Also, want to cross this bridge? Well, how about a few traps and some killer fucking fish? So yes, this game caused me to rage quite a bit. Not necessarily AVGN levels of anger, but getting close to it. And ultimately, I was determined to actually make a review complaining about how hard the game was. And then I realized something. I wasn't rage quitting. I was still coming back for more, trying to finish each level. And that's when I realized what this kind of game was. This is one of those games. This is one of those games that kicks your ass and basically has you saying, "Please, sir, can I have some more?" It is really that well designed. For one, the game's checkpoint system is decently fair. Too bad you can't quick save, even though this is a bloody PC game. But that would just be too easy now, wouldn't it? When you die, you don't go back all that far, and the enemies you kill before you die pretty much stay dead. One or two might be back, but cleared rooms pretty much stay cleared. So it might take you 10 tries to get across the screen, but by the 11th try you'll likely have killed everything, and thus you can just peacefully stroll on. The game is also generous with its health power-ups as well, and you can usually get back most of the health that you lose. Now, I've always had a problem with playing legendary characters. Why? Because when you play them, they don't seem all that legendary. Duke Nukem can get killed in 2 hits by a goddamn pig cop, when in all reality, he should be able to tank that damage like it was fucking nothing. Master Chief is another good example. In the books, Master Chief can take damage like you wouldn't believe. And yet when you play the game, he gets hit once by an elite and dies? Really? And that's really the issue. These characters in their own games are about as weak as any basic foot soldier, so they shouldn't be able to actually survive any of that. Now I know the obvious statement is, well, in their own universes they don't take any damage. Well, my thing is this. Eventually, no matter how legendary of a character you have, they're eventually going to take some damage, and so you would think they would be able to take a little bit more than the most basic foot soldier can. The controls for the game on the keyboard, at least, are decent enough, but they are definitely products of their time. You move with the arrow keys, you jump with Ctrl, and shoot with Alt. These controls are laid out well enough, but they can be a bit hard on one's fingers after a long play session, and can sometimes be a bit stiff. The game does have a save system, but it only allows you to save between different levels and not stages. Essentially, Alien Rampage is what I like to call a complete game. Everything from the sound, to the graphics, to the story, complements each other. Now I have of course mentioned these complete games in the past, but I myself have never been fully complete. Allow me to add a little bit of headgear. Ah yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am now complete as a classic gaming hipster. The difficulty is a pretty good design choice, as it makes the game that much more satisfying to play, and the game is just fair enough to stave off any thoughts of rage quitting. And once you complete a full level after trying and shouting at the screen for 20 minutes, you feel like that you've actually accomplished something. Graphically, the game is transcendently beautiful. This is a game that does not have in-your-face graphics like today's games. Oh no, this is a game with artistic integrity. Graphical fidelity and artistic integrity are two completely different concepts. A game with great graphical complexity can lack artistic integrity by not having an art design that is unique or artistically complex. You might have a 4K gray square box, but at the end of the day, it is still a gray square box. A game with artistic integrity is a game where the artist cared more about what he or she was designing, and thus the game has its own unique look and feel. And the second you see a screenshot, you know what game it is. The most notable game with artistic integrity is, of course, the Oddworld games. Now allow me to remove the beanie. The game's graphics are well designed and everything actually has its own unique look. The world that you are fighting through actually feels alien. The enemies actually look alien, and the game looks and feels like the artist used his imagination to create a world that was different from others. And you can really tell just how much effort was put into the game by looking at all the minor detailing throughout it. From the player sprite itself to the fact that the helper units actually have facial expressions. The enemies for the game are also unique as well, as the first enemy you fight is a fire-breathing snail. You know what? This next statement actually requires this. Must have been after the pot break. And enemies just get more imaginative from there. The game is also a bit more complex than would first appear. This game is not only a kick-ass action platformer, but also a puzzle platformer, as you have numerous puzzles to solve throughout each stage, and here's an example of the game's completeness. You have to save these abominable snowmen from captivity, and they will help you once you have saved them. They are not only well designed and even have facial animations, as mentioned earlier, but they will also react to what you do. For example, when fighting, they will duck and cover. But they actually serve a purpose, and they are needed to solve various puzzles throughout the game. The puzzles themselves can range from obvious to almost point-and-click obtuse. The sound for the game is actually pretty damn good itself. As far as I know, there is no music for the game, and well, that actually works in the game's favor, as the lack of music creates a very tense atmosphere as you navigate a stage. The guns themselves sound great, even the pickup sounds are also quite a feast for the ears. But the single greatest sound is the menu sound, as it is the same one used in Doom. Why spend time talking about the menu sounds? Well, I think I shall let the hat speak for itself. One final thing to note is the fact that the game even has an awesome outro segment with the title alien giving the audience a bow instead of insulting them for quitting. Now, let's take a look at the game's story. The story starts up in prime Duke Nukem fashion with Krupak, the one who rampages, getting his ride shot down by alien bastards. And he then swears an oath to kick their asses for doing so. And yes, the story is essentially just what I said. So basically, this is an alien Duke Nukem, and if these guys ever met up, they would not fight and kill each other, oh no! Rather, they would go to the strip club and do battle in the most classic of arenas. The battle to see who can drink the most booze. And seeing as how Duke gets drunk after one beer, well, my money is on Krupak. Unless, of course, his biology is incompatible with human food, and then, well, that might end up kind of nasty. In any event, the game has a well-crafted universe, and the story is not as simple as it first appears. And this, of course, is from an era where everything had a lore entry, and this game is no exception. You know who you are, what you're doing, and hell, you even learn about the planet you're on. Oh, how I love the days before the too long didn't read culture. I think one other notable factor of this game is the fact that you actually play as a green alien. Back in the 90s, before games were focus grouped to death, games actually had imagination. You had games like Turok, where you were a Native American warrior that went and fought dinosaurs. You had games where you just weren't the same generic protagonist with the same generic cardboard personality. When I talk imagination, I'm talking about characters that may not be human, or characters that might actually have, a real personality, instead of the by-the-numbers one that we see in every fucking game these days. Just imagine if we had a new first-person shooter set in a sci-fi universe where you played a green alien voiced by Ron Perlman, and the gameplay didn't follow the two-weapon rule, and the story's not about valiant Space Marines fighting against the evil guys. And instead was a green Ron Perlman fighting people because he wanted revenge for his space ride getting shot up. I have a feeling gamers today would eat that shit up and would consider it the greatest game ever, game of the year, all years. And so that is Alien Rampage. A classic game, to be certain. While it may have started life as a Duke Nukem Forever game, it became so much more, and has sadly fallen into complete obscurity. In fact, you can get it for free on myabandonware.com. Which is good if you don't have all that much money to pay. And I, of course, cannot recommend it enough. It will kick your ass and leave you coming back for more. And so, I am General Lotz, wishing you good Duke Nukem Forever, and good Duke Nukem 3D, or whatever makes you happy.